I'm sorry, Dr. Benson, for a moment I thought we'd lost you.
No.
Yes.
So I just have one question from that has been passed on to me to ask. Dr. Benson, given your particular experiences and the particular perspective you've shared today, are there any suggestions you have of recommendations that the inquiry should consider?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's certainly something that we've been involved with both within the centre and have reflected that back to decision makers locally. I think the one thing that, having met with all families, well, most families, and having been touched by their lived experience with regards to the infections, I think that it's not just wives or spouses that have been particularly affected. I have met many parents who have lived a life with regards to their sons not being with them anymore and having died from infection. And I think sometimes whenever we look at those lives affected, I do think that additional consideration should be given towards parents. They've lived with the fact that whenever their sons were much younger, was it that one infection, was that one injection that they had given to their son, was it that one injection that they had said, look, come on, you're meant to take this, go on, and encourage them to take it. So I think parents many are not with us anymore, but I do think that their particular highlight have been highlighted to me, and I would agree. The other group then are really the lost experience of the children for these men. I get to meet these young women and young men with regards to their own children that will come into the centre with their bleeding disorder. And I can see lives, opportunities that have been lost over the years of not having a second parent in order to provide that support or that emotional support to them. School holidays that can't be afforded, houses that have to be changed, but more so with regard to the parents and the children, the inability to be able to explain to their friends of what actually their fathers had died of, and retaining that information. So I think for me, with the inquiry, all the advances and changes in the recent weeks with regards to spouses and widows is exceptional and very welcome as a start. But I do feel and I do see the impact on parents as well as children.
So,
yes, sorry, is that the last?
That was the last matter from the recognised legal representations. We haven't had anything directly from Dr. Benson's representative. I'm not sure if they have anything they wish to raise.
I hope they're not subject to the same IT problems that we've been subject to. When you said at an early stage in your evidence this morning that it was really quite telling, this is in respect to the questionnaire, really quite telling from the patient's perspective of how care had been. What did you see reflected to you as to how care had been?
Yeah, I think with regards to, I suppose it's the long-term projection. So if somebody comes in with the bleed and that bleed is effectively managed and the patients are supported and through it, but I think the direction of, I often reflect with the patients that today's decision is tomorrow's revision. So what I decide with them today is something that maybe 5-10 years time I'm going to have to revise with them. So whilst we might solve the problem today by replacing a knee or a hip or an elbow, we have to remember in 10 years time we're going to have to go back in again and to do it. So I think that the fact that there's a plan and there's a direction and there's something to support them as they go through it, that there's a point strung between hospital appointments is what I had taken from it.
Thank you. You were asked about the medical model of care, the expression used in the audit, and as to what you might understand by that. You couldn't really fathom what was quite in the mind of the author. Indeed, you're absolutely right, I think, that we would have to go to the author to know precisely. But do you think it might be that he was thinking about the medical approach, i.e. treating the disease or the condition, as opposed to taking an holistic approach, looking at the whole person in their social environment, their familial environment, their work environment, as well as the hospital treatment, and finding out what their wants, their desires, their needs were, their values.
Yes, it certainly would be one of the takes I think on it, and certainly the cornerstone with regards to my own personal practice and looking after the patients from the outset is not just, I think that my bit that I'll teach medical students as they come in contact with any patient is that they're a person, first of all, and don't classify somebody based on a disorder that they have. And I think sometimes people or patients with bleeding disorders, very often, have you had a bleed? Have you taken your treatment? And we really look at the disorder itself. I think stepping back and asking to talk to him or her about how their day has been and how their week has been, and to understand how they live with their disorder, I think is much more telling. And I think then that the support that they can get can be much more specific, and they can actually see the support.
You described how at the age of 13 to 14, youngsters, you might call them very young adolescents, but perhaps you might reserve the adolescent word for those above 13. They would transfer to the adult hospital. Now, while children, they might have the benefit of pediatric psychiatry and psychology support. While adults, they may have the adult version. What is there to cover the adolescent psychiatry, which we've heard from others has been so important?
Yeah, so whilst it's from that age, it doesn't mean that there's a very clear cutoff on that birthday that they do come across. We do try to have an element of both physical and emotional maturity, I think, with regards to them arriving within an adult-based service. And our social worker works very closely with them and with families, and we're aware of the teenager sort of CAMS type psychology approach, which is largely delivered through the community for those patients or young men who may have that type of a need for an emotional support type mechanism. So within Northern Ireland, there is that teenager bespoke type of a service, and also extends into the family as well. So for those with regards to access to it, it's not that they leave the paediatric service and suddenly go into a chasm of nothing with regards to those types of agencies.
Thank you. The last question really poses a scenario, and I want to know what your impression is used to happen and what now happens, so far as you know about what used to happen and so far as you do know what does happen. I mean, suppose that somebody who is suffering or has the condition of haemophilia A or B, but is controlling it with prophylaxis, is involved in let's say, a road traffic accident, something of that sort, but they're not anywhere near Belfast. They might be in part of South Tyrone or up round Omagh or in the west, approaching the border. They presumably, if the injury was serious and required emergency treatment, be taken to the nearest accident and emergency unit, which would not be in Belfast, would it?
Yes, that's correct, sir. We've had several instances of that over the years with regards to patients in an emergency. The ambulance service appropriately will take them to the nearest service with an accident emergency department to stabilise and to look after the patient.
So just tell me what happens with their clotting. Was it the case in the old days, if I can call it that, that the doctor, not being necessarily a haematologist himself or having ready access to haematological input, would reach into a shelf and bring out a phial of factor VIII concentrate and administer it? Would that be what would happen, or what? Yeah,
so I suppose from my perspective with regards to where clotting factor concentrates are stored there within the Belfast City Hospital, Royal Victoria Hospital, and concentrated within the McGelvin Hospital for the Northwest. Historically, whenever we would have sent factor to the local hospital's blood bank for patients to collect, on occasions where we have faced such issues with regards to road traffic accidents, we are aware of what stock is currently being held pending its collection by a patient. Therefore, we will take the vials out of that bag and then we will use that for the patient. Patients will carry a card which will highlight their bleeding disorder and treatment, But for the vast majority, we've actually been phoned in advance, and we have been able to dispatch factor promptly. And on most occasions, the factor has arrived before the patient has in the ambulance. And so with regards to our perspective, that's the way that it's been. Historically, I'm not sure whether or not all hospitals had historically stocked 1 or 2 batches of a clotting factor concentrate, or whether or not similarly they were confined to sort of a hub and spoke type model. If they were confined to the hub of that, I'm less sure whether or not everybody held a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much. That's all that I have to ask.
Dr. Benson's representatives confirm that they have no questions. Dr. Benson, is there anything else you would like to add?
Yes, I'll try. So just briefly, I think the Haemophilia multi-professional team are a collection of healthcare professionals with the drive and a passion for their chosen discipline, as well as the patients that we get to look after. Over the last years, in direct response to patients and their families' needs, the expansion of this team has been supported by specialty commissioning service at the health board level and within the Belfast Trust, not just in meeting the needs or the cost of clotting factor concentrate, but also in furthering the holistic care of the individual. Whilst none of the team had been present at the beginning for many of these patients' journeys, we have all walked alongside them. At times, we have carried them. And we will never forget the patients and their families. We do hope that in doing so that we can ease the challenges that can come along with living with a bleeding disorder in Northern Ireland. We have been, we are, and we remain fully committed to continue to enhance that support during and beyond the terms of the inquiry. And at all times, we do uphold the aims of the inquiry with our 110% support to it and our patients. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the energetic enthusiasm which you've shown throughout your evidence for the service of which you are part. For me, I think, if I may say so, what sums up a lot of your evidence and approach were 2 things that you said. One, towards the beginning, when you said you're not there to focus on our needs or what we think best for them, but on their needs, talking about the patients that you served. And just at the end, when you were describing how you wanted to treat patients as a person. And indeed, I think what you were reading from a moment ago was scripted in advance. And you used the word holistic, looking exactly the word that I put in your mouth a moment or two before. So these things don't go unnoticed. I don't think anyone would have failed to be moved by your reaction to some of the patients and be assured by that, as I see it, your care for your patients is deeply genuine. Nobody has questioned it. Nobody could here after your evidence, and thank you very much for telling us what it is like now in Belfast and through Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Thank you.
Now, I just want to say a word or two to those who are watching. Easter is a time to look forward. We've come to the end of the current batch of hearing days. As most of you will know, we're about to take a break from hearings for 6 weeks. Well, I want to take this opportunity to let you know of our plans for what happens after that. You'll understand that it cannot be absolutely cast in stone, for we're timetabling in what is still an age of uncertainties. But first, those next 6 weeks will be well spent. I mean, look at the questioning over the last few months and at the presentations. The evidence of the very considerable hard work done by my team and by counsel to the inquiry has been there for all to see. But I do not mean to suggest it's been down to them alone. I'd like to pay tribute, too, to the contribution that so many of you, directly or through your representatives, have made to the process. The label participant says it all. The inquiry depends upon all its participants for its success. You have passed on the benefits of your own research, your own insights, your own questions. There's a lot more work to be done, but it is being done, and it will continue to be done with your help. Thank you. The fruits of that work over this coming break should be there to be seen in the future hearings. So what about those future plans? Well, in May, the inquiry will take evidence on financial support in all 4 UK nations about the Haemophilia Society, and it will consider the ethical and professional guidance which was given to clinicians. In June, we will hear from campaigners who in the main have not previously given evidence, consider evidence about smaller haemophilia centres, and turn a spotlight on Lord Mayor Treloar's college. In July, the first government witnesses will be called to give evidence. Then we take a break from hearings, though work, of course, will continue. And during that pause, in August, the inquiry will move to its new premises on Aldwych. They will provide all of us with very similar facilities to those we have here. After that, hearings will resume from the 20th of September. So a break from the end of July to the 20th of September. As I've said before, this autumn we will scrutinise the pharmaceutical companies and blood services. We will then hear from more government witnesses, including on the issues of candour, openness and cover-up. And of course, more from those people who were infected and affected as a result of NHS treatment. I shall not forget my promise to put people first and last in this inquiry. The last thing I want to do is to impose further demands on those of you who felt they've had to spend a lot of their available time, almost equivalent of a full-time job, watching the inquiry hearings, reading disclosed materials in advance of them, and often suggesting helpful lines of questioning to the inquiry through your representatives. I want to thank you again for that. It may seem to some of you that the pace at which we've had to move, despite the breaks, has been inexorable. But not only that. Some of the memories that the evidence has brought back to the surface may have been difficult. And I just want you to know that I recognize that. But right back at the start of the inquiry, I also set out the principle that we would complete the inquiry as quickly as reasonable thoroughness permits. We must make best use of time, demanding though that is. I am therefore issuing today a statement of approach on final submissions now, and encouraging those of you who are recognised legal representatives and unrepresented core participants to start, not complete, how could you, but start, yes you can, your preparations now for making closing statements, covering both the conclusions you think I should reach and those recommendations you hope I will feel able to make. I will read and hear those submissions when we come to the end of the oral hearings we have planned. Well, for now, though, it is an Easter break. We've had a taste of fine weather already. There should be more to come. I hope you've had a chance to enjoy it safely and have a chance to enjoy what comes safely. And now that restrictions are easing, perhaps meet some of those you've not been able to meet for the best part of a year. I wish you all a refreshing break.